Now I'm going to show you one approach to producing a camera move. Again, as in the previous tutorial, here's a setup that shows a traditional animation scene with a camera move indicated uh, going from 7 field to 11 field. So the camera pulls out as the character hops forward. Um, Again, this is helpful to compose your shots, especially if you're working on paper. But it's not really something that we're going to use in this digital camera move that we do in TV Paint. So I'm going to set those layers aside. You can have those and scan them with your drawings and have them as reference layers just to remind yourself this is how I'm thinking of the composition. This is the start pose, or this is the start composition, and then by the end of the shot where the rabbit has hopped forward, the camera has widened out to the field indicated in red, the 11 field. So it's good to keep it around for reference, but we're not actually going to use it now. So I'll set those aside. Okay, so think of this as your scanned drawings and your scanned animation as separate pieces of artwork, which they are. They're physically separate pieces on the paper, and even as you've scanned them and digitized them now, they're separate layers. So we're going to think of these as our source layers. We're not actually going to change or alter these in any way, but we're going to look at them through a virtual camera. And with this as our source, we can move these elements around inside of our virtual camera to produce the illusion of camera movement. In this case, a camera pull out or a truck out as the camera moves back. So the way you would do that is keep this project open, but we're going to start a new project. So from the File menu, start a new project. Now this was composed in 4:3 aspect ratio, so I'm just going to keep it in 4:3 aspect ratio for now. So that would be 2048 by 1536. That is a 4:3 aspect ratio. So start my new project. Now I have a blank canvas. Now remember, in TV Paint, you can keep multiple projects open. So we're going to switch back and forth. This is our source project. This is the original animation of the rabbit hopping. But over here in the new project, this is where we're going to do the camera move. So before you do anything, you want to save the project and save it, name it something that will make sense. In this case, I'll just call it Mod 13 Scene A5 Rabbit. Anything that identifies it, and then save it in an appropriate folder on your computer. Alright, the scene has now been named and saved. So this is a separate scene, and we know, going back to our source file, the duration of the scene, very short here, is 34 frames. Some of the drawings are on ones, some are on twos. But this is the duration, so we know that that's how long our camera move needs to last. So over here, I'll drag this out to 34 frames. And this untitled layer, I'm going to double click on it and rename it Scene A5 Camera Move. Now, to do the camera move, we're going to use a tool in the TV Paint effects stack. The effects stack has many different effects that you can apply to enhance your animation. In this case, we're going to be using a tool called the KeyFramer tool. So to get to the effects stack, you go up to the little magic hat here and click on that, and that opens the effects stack. You go to Add Effects. In this case, we're adding a single effect. So single effect. Now go down to Motion, and open the KeyFramer. All right, so this is the KeyFramer. It has different coordinates that you can set, but I'll show you the three we're going to focus on are the X, Y, and Z coordinates. Now remember, when it refers to KeyFramer here, it's talking about the keyframes that it's going to set for the movement of the elements in the scene that will produce the illusion of a camera move. It doesn't refer to a key drawing. When you refer to a key in animation, it's one of the main drawings, one of the extremes. This is not about drawings. This is about where the camera elements are placed, how they move. So a key frame defines, from this point to this point, where it moves. Let me just show you on this first frame. If I hit this little key button, the key icon, it's to create or delete a keyframe. I'm going to just click it. You see how it's set a keyframe under my first frame. That's just the basic centered position here. It hasn't done anything. There's been no move applied. But I just want to show you that's how you set a keyframe. If you want to delete the keyframe, go back up and click the key again, and you see how it disappeared. So again, click the key to set a keyframe. Now if I went to the end position, frame 34, and I changed these coordinates, I changed the X coordinate, that moves it east-west or right-left, and the Y coordinate moves it up and down, which is also referred to as north-south. You see how that's moving the center point. The Z coordinate moves in and out. It makes the image either larger or smaller. So now I've set a new keyframe here at the end. You see the new keyframe that appeared. Now watch these numbers change as I scroll along the timeline. And you can see it moving here in the center. That's showing the change that's happening. The camera, if you see the yellow field, the camera is moving in to the side and up. Or you could say it's moving in, it's trucking in, and it's moving west and north inside of the camera field. And going back to our imagined, get out of that for a moment, you're working within this 12 field area, right? Okay, so that's how you would set a keyframe. Now we won't get into it now, but you can set other keyframes in the middle. It's not just from point A to point B. It could be here. Now I've set a new keyframe here, and you can see it appeared under 17. So now I've got to move from A to B to C. Now there are many different ways to refine that movement. You can add a spline to it. So you click on that B point and change the position from linear to spline. That now gives you these handles. So now you can see how I can make it a curved move. Get in a little closer there so you can see. So this allows a little more subtlety in the movement. So now you can see the camera is following that curve from A to B to C. And then each of those have been set on the timeline, and when you apply it to a piece of artwork, you'll get a camera movement happening within that artwork. So let me reset this, and then we'll show you how to apply that on our example with the rabbit hopping. Okay, so you've opened up the KeyFramer in the effects stack, which is from the little magic hat the effects stack, add effects, single effect, and you go down to motion, KeyFramer. Now we're inside the KeyFramer. The first thing you need to do is select the source. Remember, our source is over here. This is our source. So let's get back into this. Go to the Source tab. From the drop-down menu, you're going to go to Project List, and it's this one right here. It's the first project. Okay, this is our current project here, Mod 13 Scene A5 Rabbit, and the other project I've named Mod 13 KeyFramer Camera Move. But that's the one you want to select. Make sure you select the correct source. And I'm going to make sure the preview window is clicked on. So now you can see this is a referencing. This is like a window. Think of it like a window. You're looking through a big window over here at this. Now notice it's closer. It's cut off. And the reason is this window, this is our camera view, our virtual camera. Remember, it's slightly smaller. We set it for 2048 by 1536, which is a 2K film resolution. Our original project is bounded inside of this yellow box. It's larger. Okay. If I move this around, you can see the effect of looking through this window, through this camera view at our scene, which is over here in our source layer. So I'm going to first just position it where I started. Now I'm actually going to move in a little bit closer. So let's go back here and go over to position now that we've got the source. Notice I haven't set any keyframes yet. Right now I am going to zoom in just a little bit closer and move a little bit further over. Okay, so I get this as this is where my scene is going to start. That's the composition I want at the beginning. So I set the keyframe. That has set these coordinates as the first keyframe. Advance to the end. Now if I just dragged it over like this, it would follow the rabbit, and you can see that a preview just by scrubbing. You see how the camera is following the rabbit as he hops forward. So that might be fine. That might be the camera move you want. There's actually no truck in or out, no zoom in or out. It's just the camera in a straight path following the rabbit as he hops forward. But in fact, our original layout on our source scene indicated that we were going to zoom out wider. So here at this last keyframe, I'm going to adjust the Z axis to pull out. So you can see now I'm seeing more of the image. And I need to move it down so we're not seeing the peg holes. Let me just do this. Just drag it down. And think like this. And I adjust that until it looks like where I want my camera moved to end up. And that's equivalent to the 11 field. So now you can finesse that a little in the middle. Let's say right about here, I want the camera to be just a bit lower as it pulls out. So what I would do in this case is on each of these points, I'm going to switch the mode that they're in from linear, in this case, to smooth. And watch what that does. Set each one to smooth just by right-clicking. Okay. So now, watch what happens in this middle position. If I just pull it down a little bit, I'm sorry, actually I'll pull it up a little bit, which is going to make the camera move down. Look how the move automatically goes on this curve. So that's the smoothing effect. You went way up, you can see, there you can see it better. Now obviously we would not do that in this case because we don't have room down at the bottom. We're actually off the peg holes at this point. You would, if you had a larger background, you could do this kind of move. So the camera would literally hop with the bunny. It would go whoop, up and down. But in this case, we're just going to do a subtle curve. So now as it follows, and you can see it set a new keyframe there where I added that at frame 17. So now you can see the camera just slightly curves as it's moving out. And so that's my move. So now to get that camera move rendered, you have to right-click on the timeline, select all the frames. So all the frames are selected. The effects stack is set to apply on current layer selection. That's what we want. And in this case, on all the frames. Now you have to hit Apply Effect Stack to render the camera move. Now you can close out of the effect stack, but before you do that, remember, if this is the move you like, and you might want to reuse this or re-render it later, you can always save it in your effects bin. Just go to Add, and then name it something. You can name it, Rabbit Camera Move Scene A5 or whatever you want. And it will always be there in your effects stack. So you can go back and add it immediately. You don't have to recalculate all the coordinates. You just load in the scene and there it is. One other thing I'll show you, we've set these first points and last point and the middle point, so we've got that slight curve on it. The other thing you can do to affect the camera move is use the speed profile, which is here at the top. So first you need to click that to select it, then double click. And that brings up this profile curve. And I usually drag it out so I can see it displayed like this, a little easier to see. And change it to spline mode. Now if you click anywhere on this line and you put another point, that creates a little curve at the beginning and a curve at the end. So in effect what you're getting is a slow out at the beginning and a slow in at the end. So it's a subtle thing, but it actually keeps the move from being too abrupt when it starts and ends. Then after you've set the speed profile, you can close it. And so you do the same thing as before. You select all the frames and then apply the effects stack to render it. Alright, let's close out of the effects stack and get back to full size. So now here is our finished move. The rabbit hops forward, camera pulls out as he's hopping along there. So this is the finished camera move. It's been rendered. It's referencing the original source animation, which hasn't changed. Your source animation, just leave it as is, because you might want to redo this camera move. You might look at it, let's say this was part of a short film, and you cut this into the reel and realized, I think maybe the camera needs to pull out a little faster, go slightly wider than we have it. Well, so then you just go back to your source animation and start a new project like we did before and re-render the move. So you haven't changed anything on the source animation. You've kept that as it is. So now you've got this rendered move, and you can export it as usual. Go to the File menu, Export. Now, 2048 by 1536, which is the 4:3 resolution that I chose, that's quite a large file. That's a 2K resolution, which is fine. You can use that. You could downscale it if you wanted. If you were to downscale this to upload to your online class, I would say you could take it down to 1280. So that's going to render 1280 by 960. That's going to keep the same aspect ratio. It's going to look like this. It's just going to be a slightly smaller resolution. In the past, I've often recommended even rendering to like 640 by 480. That is still fine, to view. That's enough resolution to see the move, and it'll look fine. So I'm just saying you don't necessarily, if you're uploading this to a class or you want to save space, you don't have to render it full size. You can downscale it. In this case, I'm going to say 1280 by 960 is fine. So then you set however you're rendering it, in this case to an AVI. I've got the quality set to 100. Really anything between 70 and 100 is fine. You'll see minimal difference between that. The file size obviously will be larger at 100% quality, but for rendering a pencil test out, probably 70 or 75 is fine. So then you're going to name your file, whatever the scene name is, and save it to an appropriate place on the computer, and then export it. Now your other option is to render it out to a movie, and in this case you want to use RGB, and you've got two options, lossless and compressed. Lossless is going to make a very large file size. The quality will be, as it says, lossless. Compressed is fine for most things. In this case I would use compressed. And then you just export it, and then you've got your finished movie.